Hello and welcome to another of the Talk Wildlife Skype interviews. Today I've got Kabir Kaul, who is the winner of the BTO Marsh Awards for Young Ornithologist of the Year, but so much more. He may look young, but trust me, when you've heard him speak, you'll know that he's a lot older than he looks, even though you are only 14. Is it 14, 15?
Yeah.
14, yeah. Right. Okay. So hello, first of all. How are you?
Hi, Alan. I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Good. Yeah, very well. Thank you. Very well. Right. So I do want to talk to you about your work with the likes of Cameron Bespolka and the Rspb and, you know, all the rest of it. But I think, first of all, what we'll do is we'll just set the scene. So let's talk, first of all, of how you first got interested in nature. What was it that inspired you to become interested in nature?
Well, I've always been interested in nature. And when I was about 1 or 2 and Planet Earth had just been released, I saw my grandma in the living room watching it on the TV, and seeing all these different animals from around the world on the screen, it really enchanted me, and I wanted to know more and learn a lot more about different animals that live in on the planet. And when I was about 7, I looked out into the garden and saw all these animals, so foxes, different species of butterflies, birds in particular, and that's how I got into birding in particular. That's how I got into birding, because I'd be seeing predominantly birds on my doorstep.
Yeah. Yeah. And just so that people know where that doorstep is, you live in London. Is that right?
Yeah, I live in London.
Yeah, and I know that one of your inspirations, one of the people that influences you, is David Lindo, the urban birder.
Yes.
And I can see why, because clearly, you know, you're following a similar track. You know, he's birding in the city, in urban areas, and likewise with you. You know, you're the same. So, do you have a local patch? And if so, tell me a bit about your patch.
Yes, my patch is Ruislip Wood. It's the largest continuous area of woodland in London, which is quite nice. And I'm very lucky to have Ruislip Wood as my patch, because it's one of London's 3 national nature reserves. They're reserves of nationwide importance. But I've not made the most of it, to be very honest. There's such a big area that I haven't visited, such a big area of woodland. The woodland is comprised of 4 different woods. There's Copse Wood, there's Park Wood, Mad Best Wood, named after a fierce landowner, and Bayhurst Wood Country Park, where, as we speak, there is a cuckoo calling, and I'd love to see that one of these days. But my most favourite part of Ruislip Woods is a huge lake in the middle called Ruislip Lido, and in the winter there are large numbers of migratory wildfowl, so shoveler, teal, widgeon, tufted duck, pochard. They all congregate on the lake, and the occasional goldeneye too, and it's wonderful to see. And in the summer, so about now actually, the spring and the summer, there'll be hirundines in the evenings catching in their hundreds insects off the water, and terns too. It's a real ecological paradise.
It sounds brilliant. And so there's a cuckoo on your patch at the moment. Have you seen a cuckoo on your patch in the past?
Never.
So that would be a first.
Yes.
So right, I bet you're regretting being indoors.
Yes. What have you seen in your patch recently?
So my patch, because of lockdown, my patch is literally over the road. I've got a common over the road, which is only probably about, well, it's probably about 30% the size it was when I moved in, because they've built on a lot of it at the far side. I would say at the moment it's very quiet. I've had blackcap, I've had chiffchaff, I've had a song thrush singing on there since lockdown started. I'm starting to think that song thrush is not going to get a mate this year. So, but yeah, I mean, apart from that, you know, I've had lesser whitethroat there in the past. I'm hoping they'll come back. It generally comes back and arrives tomorrow, the 7th of May. Because the first time I saw it was on my birthday. It's my birthday tomorrow, and it's going to be there because I can feel it.
Happy birthday tomorrow.
Thanks very much. At my age, you start celebrating birthdays. So that's my patch. So you've got a patch in London. I know that because you wrote a blog about London National Park City. So there are national parks there. There are other reserves there. Have you managed to get around any of the others? Do you have any that you sort of outside of your patch that you like to visit?
Well, my goal eventually, the very, very long-term goal, is to visit all these designated sites. I've created an interactive map, but it's not a map of green spaces as such. It's designated wildlife sites. So they all have their own designations to protect them for the future and the species that live on there. So people and wildlife can coexist. And each of these sites have their own story to tell, and they all have something special to offer, every single one of them. And they range from submerged forests to old chalk mines to docks that have been rewilded. And one of these docks are home to one of London's largest teal populations. And the remarkable thing about this particular site is that the birds that migrate, the teal that migrate hundreds of miles every winter to be in this dockyard, they are not bothered at all by the noise of the development around them. There's a constant noise of machinery and chainsaws and diggers, but they're not bothered at all. And that just shows how remarkable urban wildlife is. It's London's wildlife at its finest, really.
Yeah, it's amazing what wildlife will put up with, and we do give them a lot to put up with. So, yeah. What about outside of London? And, I know you've obviously, and we'll talk about it in a minute, the BTO camps that you've been to. Do you have any real sort of special reserves that have sort of left an impression with you from outside of London?
Well, even though London's my main area of focus, I've had quite a few reserves that have really influenced me and that are really magical that I've seen outside of the capital. Every year, my family and I, we go to North Norfolk, and we go to see the pinkfeet. My mum especially loves the sound of pinkfeet flying over the Wash estuary. And it's great to hear them every year. And we go to see the waders at Snettisham and at Titchwell as well. And the North Norfolk coast is really a special place for all of us, all of my family. And just because of the huge range of biodiversity and the many different bird species, especially, you can see there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to live in Norfolk.
Wow.
And spend a lot of time sort of, especially at Titchwell. It seems to be, if I get in the car and I just tell my car I want to go birding, it just takes me to Titchwell. There's just something about Titchwell. It's a magical place, but Clyde as well and all the rest of it. It's a really, really good place to be.
Clyde is great as well.
So yeah, too right. And you, so one of your introductions to Norfolk came through the BTO camps in 18 and 19 that you've done. Can you tell us about them and how they influenced you? What were they all about, and did you enjoy them? Presumably.
So before the camp, I felt kind of lonely in a way because I didn't know anyone who had a similar passion to me at all. But when I went on these camps, I didn't feel so alone. And I made friends who I'm still in contact with today, who are like-minded people, and they have similar passions for wildlife and the natural world. And what's remarkable is that they've all done such inspiring things for their communities and developed the understanding of birds and other animals that thrive in their local areas, and they've brought that focus to their local communities. And that really motivated me and moved me, and it gave me the confidence to restart an old mapping project which I'd deemed pointless a few months before, called Nature Reserves of London, which is an interactive map I made.
Can I just stop you there for a second? It's still part of the interview, don't worry, I'm not stopping the interview. I just want to check something. The map that you're referring to, is that the map in the article you wrote on the Cameron Bespolka website?
That's the map, yes.
And you created that?
Yeah.
Because it's an amazing piece of work. Well done. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And if you live in London, go and have a look at it. It's really, really good. So sorry, I interrupted you there, but I can't believe that that was created by you. When I looked at it, didn't sort of realise that actually you'd done that yourself. So well done, and that's brilliant.
Thank you.
Right. So yeah. So carry on. You were talking about the BTO camps. I just got a bit excited about your map there.
So yeah, these camps are really informative, and they really give you a wide range of opportunities. They're actually in association with the Cameron Bespolka Trust, which I'm an ambassador for. And on each of these days, you visit a different nature reserve in the area. So that could be Weeting Heath, Laken Heath, and Thetford Forest too, where you get to ring nightjars. And that's a wonderful sight to just see a nightjar. And you see all these different types of habitats. You get involved in a wide range of activities, different types of surveying, and it really opens up your mind to the wide world of conservation. And that's what I find fabulous, because it's a lovely, gentle introduction to what conservation can be for a young person.
Absolutely, and I can completely relate to the nightjar experience, because when I worked at the BTO, I was lucky enough to go out with Dawn and various other people from the team, Greg and Ian, and I tell you what, I was like a kid in a toy shop, and I was probably, well, how old would I have been? I'd have already been in probably 50-year-old, but amazing, absolutely amazing experience.
Yeah.
To hold a nightjar, it's just crazy.
Yes.
So yeah, so I can relate to that. It's really good. So taking the BTO camps and taking a little bit further about sort of young people in nature, how are you finding it? Are you sort of meeting a lot of like-minded people, and you know, are there people coming on board and saying, yeah, we want to get into nature rather than play games in front of a computer? How is it working in the world of the young?
Well, I think because of these camps with the BTO and the Cameron Bespolka Trust, their influence is really changing the mindsets of young people, because myself as an ambassador, our job is to spread the word of the trust, the opportunities that they bring, and try and get children involved in nature wherever possible, immerse them in the natural world around them, particularly on their doorstep. So eventually the idea is they can make a difference for future generations too. And that is really encouraging young people. I've set up a wildlife society at school, which is based on the aims of the trust. And because of that, it's becoming more acceptable to enjoy wildlife and birds. And children's curiosity can really be seen here, because they want to learn about the natural world, especially in school, and how they can make a difference as an individual. And just surveying the area really changes their perception of their doorstep in particular, because they might have just seen it as it is, but slowly and gently guiding them through how to look and identify for different species, and telling them to look in different places in their local doorstep really improves their well-being and boosts their mental health too, because they're really starting to enjoy and appreciate their doorstep and their local area as a whole.
Yeah, and I noticed from, I think it was in your profile on the Cameron Bespolka, that you talked about sort of pressures from others, that people might might be peer pressure, you know, basically because they are a birder or into wildlife.
Yes.
Is that still sort of prevalent? Is that still a thing? It was certainly when I was a lot younger. Is that still around?
Well, because people's mindsets are being changed, it's slowly becoming more acceptable and cool, as they say. But I think the change is very gradual, but progress is being made. And children's mindsets and teachers' mindsets too are being changed. And that's the whole point. It's a big step in the right direction.
Excellent. And you obviously you mentioned the society set up in the school, which is fantastic news. Maybe we should take a blueprint and send it out to all the schools. But do you think that there is enough being done in schools? And this is not school bashing or teacher bashing or anything like that. I know how busy they are, and you know, but do you think there's enough being done in school to educate people about nature conservation and all the rest of it? Because excuse me, at the end of the day, it's a lot of schooling to me nowadays seems like it's still harping back to sort of all days gone by. I think, you know, wildlife needs to be much more on the agenda. So do you think that it's been covered in schools?
Well, you're right, because children are spending the least time outside in human history, and that's a huge problem, because the knowledge from older generations or previous generations is being lost because it's not being taught to the current generation and future generations as well. They're not going to be taught this either. So you're absolutely right. Something needs to be done in the curriculum itself. It shouldn't be up to the students to find the initiative. I mean, it's great that students are finding these opportunities to start societies in school, but it should be the teachers as well. The curriculum should include a natural history GCSE, because yes, biology and geography and other subjects do touch on that subject, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. Natural history involves studying animals and art, specimens, going out on many different field trips to the different habitats of the UK, identifying common species. There's a whole range of subjects that aren't covered in the normal curriculum that stands today. Something needs to be changed there.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think, yeah, it's, you know, there are things teachers can do, there are things that head teachers can do, but I think the message needs to be got to the likes of people in the government. You know, I think that they need to stop messing about with sort of changing the curriculum here and changing it there and moving this and changing the goalposts, and say, right, okay, look, let's bring it up to date and make it modern, because we need something like that in schools. And it's great to hear somebody that's actually at school say that, so that's great. So brings me on to the Cameron Bespolka Trust. I've heard lots about them. I've had very little to do with them so far, but I have heard lots about them. Everything I've heard has been more than good. Can you tell us, first of all, introduce Cameron Bespolka Trust, because we've talked about it, but we haven't really introduced it. So introduce it and tell us what it's about.
So the Cameron Bespolka Trust is a charity set up to encourage young people, particularly from the ages of 11 to 17, to enjoy nature as much as possible, because that's the age group which has really lost connection with the natural world. And we give them new opportunities, and just like bird camp, and give them the skills to make a difference for the natural world. Because if we don't notice and appreciate and learn about the wildlife on our doorstep and around us, we can't protect it. We don't have the knowledge to protect it whatsoever. So what I love about the trust is that they're really encouraging 11 to 17-year-olds. I know it's hard, particularly in that age group, but slowly and gradually and gently bring them to learn to love nature really improves their well-being and helps them see the world in a different way and want to make a difference for future generations. And that's the aim of the trust.
Excellent, and you're dead right. I mean, you know, that's a difficult age group, but it's an age group that, you know, we need to nurture. We need to bring them along. You need to sort of get them back into nature, because, you know, it's not the fact that they have never been interested in nature.
Yes.
You know, kids are born with a fascination, as David Attenborough once said, and they grow out of it. So what you're doing and what the trust is doing is actually reminding people about that and saying, look, you know, get back to it. There was a time when you enjoyed it, you can enjoy it again. So get back to it. So, you know, it's a great job that the trust is doing. It's a great job that you're doing as one of their ambassadors. And I know there's about, I think there must be about 8 to 10, is it, ambassadors in Bespolka that are actually sort of youngsters like yourself?
Yes, there are 12 ambassadors. And well, there are more than 10 ambassadors now, and each of us have a different, slightly different interest in different aspects of nature, and we try and bring that forward and share it with we'll share it with our peers and with other schools, and spread the word of the trust through our various passions. Yeah,
and as I say, that's great. That, you know, it's definitely the way to go, because, you know, as we said when we were offline, you know, at the end of the day, people need to care about nature. They won't care about nature unless they understand it and they know it. So, you know, we've got to instill that in them. We've got to get people understanding it. It's not just kids, you know, it's adults as well. You know, there is a number of adults that actually grew up as the first of the gamers, you know, so they spend a lot of time in front of computers, and now they've got kids and they've been disconnected from nature. So it's getting them back as well. So what you're doing is great, because you're repairing that disconnect. So, and I wish you had looked with that, because it, you know, it's a really, really great role to be in. So anything else, first of all, because I have a couple more questions. Anything else that you would like to say about the Cameron Bespolka Trust, your role in it? I know that you also have a similar type role in the Rspb. Did you want to mention anything to do with that?
Yes, I'm an Rspb Youth Council member. The Rspb Youth Council represents the views of the Rspb's youth membership. So again, like in the Cameron Bespolka Trust, I've met a lot of like-minded young people and learned something from all of them too. And I've got to travel to all these different Rspb nature reserves around the country, which is great, like Saltham in Middlesbrough. And that's
oh, really? Yeah. Yeah, I was up there a few weeks ago. My brother lives up there. Yeah, before the lockdown, well before the lockdown. I actually was there when the Rspb first started, first took it on as a reserve.
Really?
And it has the potential, it's already showing the potential to be a brilliant reserve. So I can see why you mentioned that one. Sorry?
It's a fabulous reserve.
It's great, it's great. So what other one, because have you visited Fairburn near Leeds, Fairburnings?
No, actually, the other reserve I visited is the New Forest, and that was a fascinating experience. It was camping in Franchises Lodge, the Rspb's new nature reserve.
Right.
And coincidentally, Cameron's cottage from the Cameron Bespolka Trust is there. So it was great with having two roles there.
Yeah.
And just seeing the huge range of biodiversity there, goshawks, toads. There was a large number of toads there. There's a large toad colony in Franchises Lodge, and reptiles too. There was a reptile area with lizards and slow worms, and it's lovely to see that as well.
Sounds amazing. Sounds like I need to go, but I think you need to have a chat with the Rspb and say, look, you know, I want to go and see Fairburnings and St Aidan's. So St Aidan's is a relatively new reserve. It's near Leeds, not far from Leeds. It has breeding black-necked grebes.
Wow.
And it's a fantastic piece, you know, it's a wonderful reserve. But Fairburn was my patch when I was your age. So you'll have to go and see that just for me. So, because it's another great reserve.
I'd love to visit one day.
Yeah, you'll have to tell them. Just say, look, you know, I've got to see these reserves because I am going to spread the word about them. Because they're inland reserves as well. I think, you know, inland reserves need to be, you know, people need to hear about inland reserves because, you know, the inland reserves can be really, really good. But a lot of people do tend to you know, migrate out to the coasts to see birds. But inland reserves can be extremely good.
They've got their own specialities.
They do, absolutely. I mean, I have a lot of good memories from Fairburn. It gave me a lot of new birds, as you can imagine, because I was new to birding. So it's one of my favourites. So let's talk, we mentioned David Lindo earlier. Let's talk a little bit about your inspirations. Who would you say are your inspirations in the wildlife world?
Well, my three inspirations for wildlife around the world and initially getting into nature is David Attenborough with his documentaries. And wildlife in Britain, it's Chris Packham because of his sheer knowledge and resilience too, with all the campaigns he's doing. That really improved my passion. Improved my passion and my knowledge for the natural world in the UK. And David Lindo in London, because it's through him that my perception of the capital changed 4 or 5 years ago. That I from a noisy, crowded city to a haven for wildlife, and ever since, well, through him, I've really seen so much wildlife.
Yeah, I think David has a lot to answer for, and it's all positive. You know, before he came on the scene, there wasn't a lot mentioned about urban birding outside of people that were doing it. It didn't really have a profile. And I think what he's done is he's come along and he's raised the profile in an excellent way.
Yeah.
I have a lot of time for David. I like what he does. So yeah, I can see why he's a big influence, and the other two are pretty obvious. So that it's so. Let's talk about the future. What do you see as being sort of really important or really threatening for the future of wildlife and conservation?
To be honest, my main concern for the future of wildlife and conservation is knowledge, because without a natural history GCSE, with this huge lack of children being taught the wonders of the natural world, this knowledge in our generation, in my generation, is being completely lost, and therefore it's going to be lost in all generations that are going to come in the future. That's my worry. It's the knowledge, just to identify common species. It's all being lost.
You're absolutely right. I think people, in order for people to care about anything, they have to know it and they have to understand it. And I think that there is that disconnect. I think there's, and it's not just with kids coming up, it's with some adults as well. I think we need to find a way of reconnecting people with nature so that they will care for it. It's not just the sort of minority that are doing bird watching and mothing and all the rest of it that will then make the difference. Their voice will be heard as well, so that's a really great answer, because you could very easily have just said, oh, climate change or deforestation, but what you chose was actually something that I think is really key, which is knowledge. People need that knowledge.
You're absolutely right. We need to change adults' mindsets too, their attitudes towards the natural world, because they may not think it's worthwhile exploring the natural world. They may want their children to focus on other things other than the natural world. But bringing focus and attention to the importance on their lives and in their well-being, their everyday well-being, will really it'll really improve their perception, and perhaps even bring that attitude to their children.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been great chatting with you. You are definitely a very good ambassador for Cameron Bespolka and the Rspb. I think actually I saw on social media that Andy Clements was leaving the BTO. So I think that he's maybe a little bit early. I think he should have waited for you to be 18 and then you'd have taken over from him. Maybe in the future. So, but look, it has been great chatting to you. It's great to hear that, there are people out there of your age that are still caring, that are sharing their knowledge about wildlife. So, yeah, I think for now, because I'm sure we'll talk again in the future. Yes. Thank you ever so much, because that was a really good insight. And thanks for your time.
Thank you, Alan, for the opportunity. It's wonderful to speak to you.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay.